Hi, this is Darren Goldin at Goldin Solar. Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel where we talk about some very interesting and important issues and questions in solar energy. Today, we're continuing the discussion on net metering. So in our last video, net metering part 1, we spoke about the generalities of what is net metering. We defined net metering as the relationship between a building owner that uses energy and the utility that they use energy with, where they can pull energy off of the grid and get credit for it, or likewise send energy back to the grid and get credit for it. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more in detail. So first of all, we've defined net metering. Let's define a net meter. A net meter is a noun. It's an actual thing. So we're familiar with a power meter, an ordinary power meter. Everybody has one. Whoever's got a home or commercial building where energy is used. A net meter is a very similar device. In fact, it looks very similar. It's a regular power meter. It has the ability to measure energy, not only going from the grid to the building, but also from the building to the grid. So that's what an actual net meter is. So now I'm going to ask some of the most common questions that we encounter. So first we have, who needs a net meter? That's a great question. Whoever has solar panels installed on their building and is connected to the grid will probably benefit from having a net meter. Like we said in the video part number 1, the reason is very simple. Sometimes you're going to be producing more energy than you're using. And in that case, having a net meter is having the ability to send that extra energy back onto the grid and get credit for it. So whoever has solar panels can benefit from a net meter. The next question is, how do I get a net meter? Now, this is true for the state of Florida. In the state of Florida, net metering is the law of the land. Every utility has to accept a net metering arrangement. Now, the details of how each utility is going to manage that relationship with their customers that are producing energy changes from utility to utility. But generally speaking, and this is true for Florida and Power and Light in South Florida, that's where we do the majority of our installations, the process is like this. Once Goldin Solar completes an installation, everything's installed, the panels are installed, the inverters are installed, the system's been started and tested, and it's working. We've gotten the building officials out to the site to inspect and write the final approval of the system installation. The permit's been closed out. Then we can apply for the net meter. So Florida Power and Light requires an interconnection application, an application for net metering, some technical information about the system that was installed, and that permit card that shows that the authority having jurisdiction, in other words, the local building department, has signed it off. Once all those things have taken place, then the utility will come out and replace the meter with a net meter. In the case of Florida and Power and Light, we salute them, we take our hats off. They're very, very quick. So typically, once all the paperwork is turned in, FPL will only take about a week at most, maybe a little bit more, to replace the meter with a net meter once all the paperwork is in. Why is that so important? Once the net meter is installed, our customers can then turn on their solar photovoltaic systems and know that all the components are in place. And if they're producing more energy than they use and they get to send some back to the grid, they're going to get credit for that. So how long does it take? Well, once the construction's complete and all the paperwork is submitted to the local utility, in most cases for us, that would be Florida Power and Light, it's more or less 1 week until that net meter is installed. So where can I go to learn more about net metering? My recommendation is to go and check out the website of your local utility. We're going to post some links for more information about net metering from Florida Power and Light. Essentially, the net metering relationship is between the end user, in other words, the building owner, and the utility. And so it's really important for the building owner to understand all the details of that relationship, because at the end of the day, those two documents that I had mentioned an interconnection agreement, and an application for net metering are essentially a contract between the utility and the end user. Now, Goldin Solar, where do we fit into all of this? Well, we're going to help our customer with every step of the way. That's a complete construction and engineering and permitting and material procurement and startup and testing. We're even going to help our customers with the paperwork for the net metering and interconnection process. That being said, it is an agreement between the utility and the customers. So we're going to help out with all the paperwork, but essentially we do recommend the customers to be very familiar with the details of this relationship. How much does it cost for the utility to replace the meter with a net meter? What's the price of this net meter? So again, I'm not going to speak for every utility, but I'm going to speak for FPL. FPL, Florida Power and Light, has defined 3 tiers of the size of the system. The first tier is between 0 to 10 kilowatts. The second tier is between 10 kilowatts and 100 kilowatts. And the third tier is larger than 100 kilowatts. Now, something very important to point out here, they define the kilowatt size based on the AC capacity, not DC capacity. Well, why is this a little bit tricky? Because the panels are defined in a DC capacity. So in other words, when FPL says that a tier 1 is up to 10 kilowatts AC, essentially that means that it's up to 11.76 kilowatts DC. In a tier 1 system, in other words, up to 11.76 kilowatts DC, there is no fee at all for that net meter interconnection. So any system that's going to be 11.76 kilowatts DC or 10 kilowatts AC or smaller, there will be no fee whatsoever for that interconnection. Any system in what FPL defines as tier 2, in other words, between 10 kilowatts AC and 100 kilowatts AC, there's a one-time fee of $400. So is that reasonable? Is that fair? Probably. This device, this net meter probably does cost some money, so that's the nature of this arrangement. But I think that anybody who really understands the nature of a grid-tied solar system has to appreciate where the utility comes in that, because like we mentioned earlier, having that net meter is very beneficial because it cuts out the need to have batteries to store the excess energy production. So here are a few questions about net metering. There's one more question that we receive a lot. Does net metering mean that I can sell energy back to my utility? And that's kind of a tricky question. The answer is yes and no. Because when people say selling back, it kind of implies that they're going to get money back from the utility for it. Well, the more correct way to be phrasing that would be that you're sending energy back to the utility and you're getting credit for it. You're getting credit for it in the form of kilowatt hours, actual energy credit. So let's say, for example, that on a given month, a homeowner has produced more energy than they've consumed, so they're net positive. They've sent more energy back onto the grid than what they've taken off the grid. At the end of that month, they're going to have rollover credit onto your next month's bill. They're going to be positive kilowatt hours. So in that sense, you don't really sell energy back, you got credit for the energy that you sold back. Well, that's going to take place for a period of 1 year. Every month that you're net positive, you're going to get rollover kilowatt hours onto your next month's bill, similar to how cell phone plans used to have rollover minutes. But that's only true for a period of 1 year. At the end of 1 year, the utility is going to want to wipe the slate clean and actually buy out the customer for the excess production. They will actually send a check in the mail to the customer for the overproduction of energy. However, and this is the catch, if the utility ends up having to send a check in the mail to the customer for overproduction, that rate that they're going to buy out those kilowatt hours will be at a lesser rate than their billed. And for that very reason, we recommend to our customers to aspire in how much energy they're going to produce with solar panels to be as close as possible to what their actual consumption is. Because so long as it's energy that's produced instead of purchased from the utility, that rate, that value of the energy is exactly what the utility is charging. It's the very simple principle of a dollar saved is a dollar earned. However, if you overproduce, for example, if you produced twice as much energy as you actually need, for all that energy that you didn't end up needing, that the utility had to buy from you, actually send you a check for, the amount of money that the utility will send you that check for is going to be less than what they bill you for that energy, because they're billing you at the production cost, not at the retail value. So a few key points to summarize. First and foremost, net metering is a very good thing. FPL is very good about net metering. They take about a week to replace the net meter, the regular meter with a net meter once everything else is done. What you're going to need to get the net meter is some paperwork, amongst which a closed out building permit. In other words, the solar installation has to be 100% complete. And finally, and possibly most important, when you're designing a solar system, aim to produce just around what you're consuming. Because if the utility has to buy out your excess production, it will not be at the same rate that you pay. So here's some key information about net metering. Hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for our next videos.